An uneasy Sunday. Sundays had always made me uneasy. Not because of the silence, I could appreciate that, but because of the sluggish rhythm that seemed to take over everything. It was as if the world had collectively decided to move at half speed. No rushing, no urgency, just a long, drawn-out pause. Everyone seemed to welcome it. Everyone except me. Days like this filled me with a restless energy, a sense of being trapped in time. No deadlines, no obligations, nothing to anchor myself to. Some might call that freedom. To me, it felt like an endless void, a day where I didn't quite know what to do with myself. This particular Sunday began like most others. I sat at my kitchen table with my second cup of coffee. Morning light filtered through the half-drawn curtains, casting soft lines across the wooden surface. The newspaper lay open in front of me, but I wasn't reading it. Instead, my eyes kept drifting to the clock on the wall. The time moved slowly, matching the stillness of the day. 10:37. 3 minutes until she arrived. She was my neighbor, Claire. Mid-30s, always a little disorganized, with an energy that was both infectious and exhausting. Ever since I had moved into this apartment 3 months ago, she had made a habit to drop by on Sunday mornings. Always with some vague excuse. Do you have any sugar? Can I borrow a hammer? Or my personal favorite, my cat's stuck on the roof. Can you help? The strange part, I was pretty sure she didn't own a cat. My fingers drummed against my coffee mug as I listened to the ticking clock. Right on cue, at 10:40, the doorbell rang. I sighed, pushed back my chair, and stood up. As I walked to the door, I wondered what excuse she'd come up with this time. When I opened it, Claire stood there, holding a plant that looked like it had given up on life weeks ago. Her usual carefree smile stretched across her face, completely unaware of the theatrical predictability of her timing. "This guy's not doing so well," she announced, lifting the plant slightly. "Are you good with plants?" I looked at the wilted thing, then back at her. "Claire, this is a cactus. It's nearly impossible to kill." She grinned, as if I had just paid her a compliment. "Then I have a special talent. Can I come in?" Without waiting for an answer, she stepped past me and into the apartment. I shut the door behind her, already resigned to the fact that my quiet Sunday was officially over. Claire walked straight to the kitchen and set the cactus on the table as if it belonged there. Without hesitation, she dropped into one of the chairs, completely at ease in a space that wasn't hers. Her presence filled the room instantly, like she couldn't stand the idea of leaving any corner untouched. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything," she said with a smile, absent-mindedly tapping her fingers against the sugar jar. I raised an eyebrow. "Do I look busy?" She tilted her head, considering me. "No. But that doesn't mean you weren't enjoying your alone time." She wasn't wrong, but there was no point in saying that out loud. Instead, I exhaled and moved toward the coffee maker. "Want some coffee?" "Always," she said with a grin, as if the offer had been inevitable. As I prepared her coffee, Claire kept talking, her voice a steady hum in the background. She jumped from one topic to another, her job, something in event planning, her broken bicycle, and a dog she was thinking about adopting. She barely stopped to breathe, filling the space with words, as if silence wasn't an option. I listened with half my attention, nodding in the right places, but mostly I found myself wondering why she always ended up here. There was something about the way she showed up, week after week, with her easy smile and meaningless excuses. What was she looking for? When the coffee was ready, I placed a cup in front of her and took a seat across the table. She wrapped her hands around the mug, staring into the dark liquid as if it held the answer to an unspoken question. Then, out of nowhere, she asked, "Why do you live alone?" My hand froze for a second above my cup. The question caught me off guard, not just because of its directness, but because, for the first time since she arrived, Claire's tone was different. Less playful, more searching. I met her eyes and shrugged. "I'm not great at living with people." She nodded slowly, as if that made perfect sense. "Me neither," she admitted quietly. For the first time that morning, there was a pause, a real one. Not the usual kind of silence that made me anxious, but something else. Something that felt almost necessary. Claire stared at her coffee for a long moment before she spoke again, her voice softer this time. "You know, sometimes I think I keep talking because I'm afraid of silence." I leaned back in my chair, watching her. This was different. This wasn't the Claire who made up excuses about stuck cats and borrowed hammers. This was someone else. Someone who, maybe, wasn't as carefree as she pretended to be. "Maybe silence isn't so bad," I said quietly. She gave me a small, almost hesitant smile. "Maybe not." We sat there for a while, not saying much, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't mind. Claire stood up suddenly, stretching as if shaking off an invisible weight. She glanced at the window, where pale sunlight streamed through the half-open curtains. "It's actually a nice day," she mused, more to herself than to me. I raised an eyebrow. "So?" She turned back to me with a mischievous glint in her eyes. "So, let's go for a walk." I nearly laughed. A walk. That's what people do when they don't know what else to do. "Exactly," she said, grabbing her coat. "Sundays are for doing nothing, right? So let's do nothing outside instead of inside." I wanted to argue. I could have said I was comfortable here. I could have come up with a dozen excuses. But before I could stop myself, I was standing up, reaching for my jacket. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, like she knew I needed this before I did. So we walked. The park wasn't far, just a few blocks from my apartment, and as we entered, the crisp autumn air greeted us, carrying the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. Trees lined the path in shades of orange and red, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. The world outside felt slow, unrushed. For once, Claire wasn't filling the space with words. She walked beside me in a rare silence, her hands tucked into her coat pockets, eyes scanning the world around us. When she did speak, it was quieter, less frantic than usual. "Look at that dog," she said, nodding toward a small brown terrier chasing a ball with reckless enthusiasm. "I wish I had that kind of energy." "You said you wanted a dog," she hummed in response. "Yeah, but I think I just like the idea of having one. Someone who's always happy to see you, no matter what." I glanced at her, but she was focused ahead, her expression unreadable. A child tripped on the pavement near us. his tiny hands catching the ground before he could fully fall. Instead of crying, he giggled, pushing himself back up and running off after his parents. Claire smiled faintly. "Kids are weird," she said. "They fall, and instead of being embarrassed, they just get up and keep going." I smirked. "That's because they don't know better yet. Or maybe we just forget how to do that," she murmured. I wasn't sure what to say to that, so I said nothing. We kept walking, letting the quiet stretch between us. It wasn't uncomfortable anymore. In fact, I found myself enjoying it. The steady rhythm of our steps, the rustling leaves, the occasional laughter of passers-by, it all felt strangely peaceful. "Hey," Claire said suddenly, nudging my arm. "Are you actually enjoying this?" I scoffed. "I wouldn't go that far." She grinned. "Liar." Maybe I was. By the time we left the park and made our way back toward our street, the light had started to change. The sun hung lower, casting longer shadows, stretching the day toward its quiet end. As we reached my building, Claire slowed her steps. She turned to me, her usual playful expression replaced by something softer. "Thanks," she said simply. "For what?" She shrugged, but there was something unspoken in her eyes. "For the coffee, the walk, the company, for the silence," I thought, but didn't say. Instead, I just nodded. "Any time." Claire gave me one last smile before turning toward her own door. She didn't look back. As I stepped inside, closing the door behind me, I realized something surprising. For the first time in a long time, I didn't mind the quiet. The evening settled in slowly, the light outside fading into dusky blues and grays. I sat at my kitchen table again, my fingers tracing the rim of my coffee cup. The cactus Claire had brought still sat there, its small, spiky form a reminder of her unannounced visit. Strangely, I didn't mind its presence. The apartment felt different now. The silence that once felt heavy and restless was softer. Less like an absence, more like a pause. The kind of quiet that didn't need to be filled. I glanced at the clock, 7:45. The hours had passed without me noticing, and for once, I wasn't counting them down. Claire had a way of doing that, shifting things, making the world feel a little less rigid. I thought about the way she talked, always moving, always filling the air with stories and half-finished thoughts. And yet, today, in the park, she had been quiet. Not because she had nothing to say, but because, maybe, for the first time, she didn't need to. I exhaled, standing up to rinse my cup. Then, just as I placed it in the sink, a knock echoed through the apartment. Not the doorbell. A knock. Light, uncertain. For a moment, I didn't move. Then, curiosity, or something else, pushed me forward. I opened the door. Claire stood there, hands stuffed into the pockets of her hoodie. Her hair was slightly damp, like she had stepped outside in the drizzle that had begun to fall. She wasn't smiling this time. Instead, she looked at me with something close to hesitation. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I echoed, leaning against the doorframe. She shifted on her feet. I was gonna just go home, but I didn't feel like being alone tonight. I studied her for a moment, the way her shoulders tensed slightly, as if she expected me to turn her away. The way her usual confidence wavered, just a little. Without thinking too hard about it, I stepped aside. "Come in," I said. Claire hesitated for only a second before nodding and stepping inside. She moved past me, the scent of rain lingering as she walked toward the kitchen. She spotted the cactus still sitting on the table and smirked. "You kept it." I rolled my eyes, shutting the door behind me. "You left it here." She touched one of the tiny spikes carefully, then looked up at me. "Yeah, but you didn't throw it away." I didn't have a response to that. Instead, I grabbed 2 cups from a cabinet and set them on the counter. "Tea or coffee?" I asked. Claire smiled, soft, genuine. "Surprise me." As I turned to start the kettle, I felt it again, the silence. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was enough. And maybe, just maybe, so was this.